So now that the relationship has ended, paternity has been determined, and custody has been established, the hard work of co-parenting begins. If you're ready to stop the drama and work through the trauma, it's time for Co-Parent Court with your host, Judge Rochelle Jackson. Welcome to Co-Parent Court, the court where parents forget the drama and work through their trauma. I am your host, Judge Rochelle Jackson. On this episode, I'm going to answer the question about what's the difference between visitation and co-parenting. Typically, when this situation is presented to me, the scenario is such that the parties have just broken up or recently broken up, and they're attempting to navigate the boundaries, the expectations, and how co-parenting will work for them. So the scenario that's presented is mom gets a phone call from dad, and the dad says things such as, who you got around my child? I want to co-parent with you, and I want to visit with the child. So mom's response is, sure, tell me when you want to visit and we'll make it work. And what she presents to me is also, and I'm not quite sure if she presents it to him. Sometimes it is presented, sometimes it's not. When it is, it typically ends up in some verbal argument and navigating, getting back in line in terms of creating expectations, boundaries. It takes a while to navigate when you start off questioning who the other parent is bringing around your child, as opposed to carving out a schedule for when you will engage in with the child. And also that would be the visitation. And on the other side of that, or the second part of the question, is what's co-parenting. And co-parenting is the decision-making process that also has to be navigated. So let's get a start with visitation. So visitation is, it could be through agreed upon schedule. It could be through a written schedule. It could be through the agreement that there is no schedule, and whenever you want to see the child, just call me or send me a text, some type of communication, and I will make the child available to you. So visitation is about when the parent has access to the child, when that parent is going to spend time with his or her child. It could be through a schedule. It could be such that you all have decided, or the parents have decided, that it's liberal, that there's not going to be a particular schedule. So it's not going to be every other weekend or one day during the week from 4 to 7, or from Friday pick up until Monday drop off at school. Each visitation schedule is unique to the parties who are seeking to carve out what works best for them and what is in the best interest of the child. So that would be visitation, the time that's spent with the parent and the child. Co-parenting, while it involves visitation, it involves visitation to the aspect of how you're going to navigate the sharing of the physical time of the child and having those conversations outside of the presence of the child to make sure that you all could reach an agreement. But the major part with co-parenting is engaging in conversations or discussions about the well-being of the child when it comes to major decisions. And we seek to qualify major decisions as those decisions involving the education of the child. What school is the child going to attend? Are there any extracurricular activities that the child needs to be placed in at that school because of the child's some exceptionality or some support that the child may need academically? Also, co-parenting for major decisions speaks to the medical well-being of the child. Is there some proposed medical treatment that need to be decided on that will take input from mom and dad to make the best decision for the child. Another major decision that parents typically discuss as major decision is the upbringing, the spiritual upbringing of a child, and whether or not there's going to be any formal training that the child is going to be exposed to, either as a supplement to what mom and dad does, or maybe because mom and dad come from different religious backgrounds, and now the decision has to be made. The decision, someone wants to make a decision as to how we're going to rear the child in terms of exposing him or her to our religious foundation. Those would be considered major decisions, but those are not necessarily the instances that bring up all the challenges of co-parenting, because sometimes parents get phone calls from the other parent that may ask questions such as, what are you feeding my child? Are you still feeding him or her, fast food? Child told me yesterday that y'all went and got some pizza. And, or the child told me that, your new boo or your new man has taken him or her to get a burger. And I don't want that person to be taking my child anywhere. Well, those conversations may have to happen, but they're not necessarily what should be occurring under co-parenting, because the question, or the foundational question that you need to ask, or that it has to be asked, is how does that particular instance impact the well-being of the child? And if it's not, then that's not a conversation that has to be explored between the two parents. Whether or not the true issue is the parents' lack of judgment such that they expose children to unnecessary environments that cause harm to the child, then if that's the question that needs to be asked, not the fill around about, where you're going and what you're feeding the child, but get to what the substance is that you deem in your mind, so that you all could navigate through that issue and move beyond that and set some boundaries and expectations about how new people will be introduced into the child's life, and at what point you all think it should be, because what's good for one side is also good for the other side. But to have these random phone calls about who you have around my child, just because you think you can still have this power and control dynamic, that has ended. And now the focus has to turn on to how do we co-parent, and what are the true issues that we need to discuss outside of the presence of the child, so that we can begin to make good decisions that support the well-being of this child. So visitation is the time that you spend, one parent spends, or each parent spends with the child. Sometimes we call it visitation. Sometimes we refer to it as physical access. Sometimes we refer to it as shared physical custody. It depends on whether or not you have navigated something through the court system, or whether or not you're working out something on your own without going to the courts and the courts telling you what you need to do. So as you begin to navigate, know that the issues and the discussions fall under the realm of co-parenting, and there are limits and boundaries that are fair for discussion when it comes to co-parenting. But at no time should those conversations be held in front of the child. At no time should those conversations be carried through the child. Co-parenting is an opportunity for parents to have discussions. Those discussions could again be in writing. They could be in person. They could be via telephone, via text message, Zoom, whatever your means of communication is from one parent to the next. But that form of communication should never be through a child. So until next time, this is Judge Rowe And we hope that you find a way to work through the drama and to also figure out how to resolve your trauma so that your child gets the best from both parents. Until next time, have a great day.